Well, hello everybody. Danny back from Deepsouth Homestead. Ooh, is it hot. I came in the cabin. I was going to do it on the porch because it's, kind of quiet outside. It's a little bit breezy, just maybe 15-mile-an-hour winds. But the heat index I checked is 120. So I opted to come in the cabin. Now, yes, in the cabin, it is 80 degrees in my cabin right now. It's been relentless. I checked a while ago before I came over to shoot this video. We are on day 54 of over 110 degree heat index in a row. Now, day 54, guys. There has been no let up, and I watched a dear friend of mine, Mark from Weatherman Plus. Mark says that this is going to continue on until the end of July at these extreme temperatures. And normally in the Deep South, August is our hot month. And I'm sitting here thinking, if this is what it's going to be like, I can only imagine what August is going to be like. So we're just hoping and praying we get a break from this. El Nino this year has got these blocking highs way up north up there. We got a high ridge in the west out there. Now, I will say this. The west and the Midwest is probably going to suffer a lot worse than we are. Down here, we do have occasionally a Gulf breeze off of the Gulf. Does give us a little bit of a break. The humidity is usually our biggest issue. But they're talking about this is going to go all the way up into Canada. And people up there are not used to this kind of weather. I know that when I was in downtown New York working on some of those big jobs in New York City years ago, I still remember this. It's so funny. I would get up in the morning. I lived in New Milford, Connecticut, and just outside of Kent, South Kent, and I would drive into New York every morning, but when I get up, it would be in the and I'm talking about in July now, it would be in the mid 40s or maybe 50s. A nice, cool, crisp morning, and I would drive into New York City, which was a 2-hour drive, believe it or not. And when I got to work, I was working outside of White Plains there on one particular job. I was on doing a restaurant on a harbor down there. And guys, I'll never forget this. I was working out on one of the piers there, the dock. I might call it the marina, the dock, whatever you want to call it there, coming into the Long Island port there. And all the yachts were, they all had all the yachts everywhere through there tied up and all. And it was like these multi-million-dollar yachts. I was just blown away. But I remember I was building a stairwell to a second floor restaurant balcony out there off of one of these piers. And I noticed it got to be around 10 or 11 o'clock, and I don't usually stop, and everybody was gone. And I said, well, they're gone to lunch, is what I figured. But it was a little early, because usually we didn't knock off till like 30 minutes before lunch. But at 11 o'clock and 10:30, everybody was already gone. And I was thinking to myself, man, these guys don't take a long lunch break today. And I was out there by myself working, and all of a sudden, one of them opened the door on the building and stuck his head out there and says, dude, you better get in out of that heat. You're going to have a heat stroke. Because I had a flannel shirt on because it was so cool that morning. I still had a flannel shirt on. I said, what are you talking about? He goes, man, it's 80 degrees out there with 35% humidity. You're going to have a stroke. And I just busted out laughing. I told him, I said, dude, in the South Mississippi, when I wake up in the morning and walk out the door, it's hotter than that with 90-something% humidity. I said, lots of times my heat indexes are up in the 90s when I walk out the door, and I have to work in it all day. They just could not fathom it. But I work right on through it with no problems at all. But that's where we're at, guys. Right now, we are going into some weather patterns that are really different. There is a system coming into our solar system that is going to be changing our weather in the near future, more so than what it is now. We're going to be having more earthquakes. I mean, now the day that I'm filming this, there was a tsunami. It was a massive earthquake. It was recorded 7.4 off the Alaska coast, but the geological people dropped it down to a 7.2, I think, a while ago when I was looking at it. And they do have tsunami warnings all along the coastlines going south. But these things are going to become more prevalent as we move into the rest of this year and going into next year, according to the information that's being given out there. There is a massive planetary system coming into our solar system that's putting a huge pull on the Earth's magnetic fields and stuff, and it's going to be causing the Earth to go through these changes. Now, this is not man-made. It's not global warming. This is cyclical. I mean, this happens every so many hundreds of years. It's just that the United States is not old enough to have a history of this. Now, some of your other countries like Egypt and China and Israel and, and your European countries, they have a lot older history. Turkey, Jordan, Syria, these places, they have these histories in there of these cycles and these weathery anomalies that happens. It's just in the United States, people think you're crazy if you talk about this kind of stuff. And it is being suppressed by the MSM. Now, it doesn't mean that it's not going to happen, and lots of people think that if they turn a blind eye to it, it's not going to matter. And then you have people who really don't know any different, because all they do is get up in the morning, they go to work, they sit in a cubicle all day, and they come home in the evening and sit in the house under air conditioning. They don't know any different. They just know it's hot when they go outside, but they don't really know anything. And that brings me really around to where I'm at today. We're not growing anything here right now. We still got some sweet potatoes growing. Our Danny corn's drying. We still got some peppers growing and some eggplants and things like that. But they are heat-loving plants. And even some of them are becoming really stressed in this heat that we're having here in the Deep South with no rain. I mean, everybody keeps talking about the rain that they're having. We're not getting any of it. I mean, I was looking at my book that I write in all the time. In the last 2 months, and this heat that I've been telling you that we're having, we've had 5 inches of rain. That's it. And most of it came in 2 and 3 inch rains. The rest of it's been like an 1/8 of an inch or a 1/16 of an inch coming. And then when it does, the sun pops right back out and runs back up to 110, 117 to like today's 120 heat index. And it just stifles you because it becomes a sauna, because the sun is just sucking the moisture right back out. I mean, my ponds here at Deep South are still so low that it's just unreal. Now at Pecan Grove, which is quite a distance from here, the pond's still level full of water. It seems like it's doing fine. It gets a little more rain there than it gets here. Because of the location, I guess. I don't know. But I know here at Deep South, we are just not getting any rain. It rains all around us. 4 miles up the road here it floods. And right here on this ridge, we're on one of the highest ridges in this area down in here. And it doesn't rain here, but it rains in lots of other places around us. So this little microclimate here is really suffering on, because I live between 2 creeks. I have a creek in front of me 1/4 of a mile and a creek behind me 1/4 of a mile. And the rain will run those 2 creeks and leave this ridge. It's more of a sandy ridge between these 2 creeks, leaves us high and dry. So looking at weather reports and stuff like that says, oh, well, such and such place got rain, it's not always accurate, because there are places like this that just doesn't get it. But that brings me around to where I want to go today, and that is, being able to not necessarily predict, but being able to read the weather patterns. Now, I've had to in the last, I'm gonna say in the last couple of weeks, I don't usually delete comments. That's one thing, unless they're got profanity or vulgar in some way, I don't delete anything, because I like, I think that a well-balanced forum is what it takes to be a good, to be a good learning experience, because everybody should have a say. But I've had a lot of people here lately come up and start really using some foul language and saying that I'm a prophet, that I'm claiming to be a prophet, and I never, and once in my life, have I ever claimed to be a prophet. As a matter of fact, I don't believe in that. I believe that most prophets were done away with years and years and years ago. I don't believe in modern prophets. So therefore, I wouldn't even classify myself as a prophet. As a matter of fact, the scripture talks about the prophets of the older days, when prophets were given by God himself. It's God appoints a prophet. It says that, if a prophet prophesies something and it doesn't come to true, then they're a false prophet. And then I totally understand that. But I myself am not a prophet, guys. What am I? I'm a farmer. That's what I am. God made me a farmer. And funny, when I just started thinking about that in my mind, I started thinking about, there's a gentleman, many people in the modern world don't even know who this guy is, but a lot of us older people will know, and that's Paul Harvey. There used to be a guy who come on the radio, Paul Harvey, and he had put out a video. I want to say this was in the 1960s maybe, or maybe a little later than that, and God made a farmer. And that speech that he made has so much truth to it that it's unreal. And that's kind of what I am in a lot of aspects, because a lot of people ask me, Danny, where are you? Right now in this part of my life, let me say this, in this portion of my life, I'm just a farmer. Now, I'm not a high-tech farmer. I don't believe in this big ag stuff, even though I've been in the ag business. I don't like the 1,000-acre farmers, and although I know it takes that to feed people, I understand that. I'm just not that person. I'm more of a permaculture type, regenerative type person who I like to take a piece of property, and I like to utilize that piece of property. And when I leave it, I like to leave it in better shape than it was when I got it. That's where I'm at. And that's why at Pecan Grove, I am working really hard every day to try to develop that property. Now, 30 years ago, it was a nice cattle farm. I knew the gentleman who owned it then, because at the time I was running some landlines around that property when I met the gentleman. And that's how I become familiar with that property. And now it's been let set for 30 years. No cattle on it, trees and weeds and bushes and whatever, anything you can imagine. Invasive species is like popcorn trees, tongue nut trees, all this stuff has come up and taken it over. And I have been I've had track hoes and dozers and different things in. We have taken up a lot of the invasive species, and I still am nowhere near being there. The tongue nuts just keep coming up by the hundreds, and because there's just seeds in the ground everywhere. The popcorn trees are doing the same thing. I am a farmer. And the reason I say that is I had someone here a while back that was here visiting me that knows me, and they said, Danny, we, talking about themselves also, we're a dying breed. And I really didn't think a lot about it at the moment, but once the gentleman had left and I was laying there in bed that night thinking, I thought to myself, I said, you know what, we are a dying breed. because I thought about Paul Harvey's, and I'm gonna link that. I'm gonna link that speech up here if I can remember to. And a lot of you may know it. I get up between 3:30 and 4:30 every morning, or 4 o'clock, usually around 3:30, 4 o'clock, and usually by 4:30, I'm waking Wanda up because I have her breakfast fixed, because I fix breakfast in the morning about that time. Because I try to follow and do what the Bible says. You know, the Bible says that a man looks well unto his flock. And I get up, we eat, and then I leave out and I go feed my cows, my rabbits and stuff here at Deepsouth, and it's still dark. I go take care of all my animals, it's dark. I get in my truck and I drive to Pecan Grove. And when I get over there, I have cattle over there because I've actually bought cows and everything. And plus I've transported some of mine over there. And I have cattle over there. And I feed, water them and everything like that. It's still dark. It hasn't even come daylight yet. And then I work from that point over there because I have lights on my equipment. I work from, say, usually by the time I feed them, it's usually somewhere between 5:30 and 6 time I've drove and everything. And then some mornings it's a little earlier, some mornings it's a little later. I'm out usually working before daylight with lights and stuff. And I will stop sometime around 10:30 or 11 o'clock in the day because the heat index has just gotten so hot at my age. I really don't think it's healthy and wise for me to continue working. Then I'll drive home and then I'll eat. And lots of times Wanda and I will wait till around 6 or 7 o'clock in the afternoon and we go back to work, or I go back to work. Wanda does her things with videos and she tends Deepsouth here. While I'm over there, she's taking care of Deepsouth. And many times, if the heat index is not too hot, I'll drive back and I have lights on my equipment and everything, and I'll work till 10 o'clock at night because that is the cooler times that I can work. And I do this till 10, say I work till 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, then I drive home. Believe it or not, I eat again because I've burned up so many calories, I eat again. And I take a bath and I go to bed and I get up and I do it all again the next day. I mean, that's what a farmer does. God made some people just to be farmers. He didn't make everybody to be a farmer. It's not new for me because when I was in the timber industry, I would get up. There was times I got up at 2 o'clock in the morning and I drove 4 hours to work. I worked an 8-hour day and then I drove 4 hours home. You know, I'd get home 9 o'clock at night many times, take a bath, eat, go to bed, get up at 2 o'clock. I've done that sometimes, one particular period of my life, I did that for 4 years. It's not for everybody. God didn't make everybody to be able to have that kind of a drive about themselves. But that's the life that I live. And the people who live the life I live and do things the way I do, get up early. I know we've had people visit us, a lot of our YouTube friends, Miss Lippy. Miss Lippy's up early in the morning. I know she is. She tells me lots of times, me and Wanda, she's up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning sometimes, and she's drinking her coffee, and she's already going about her business at that time of the morning. You know, I mean, there are people who do this. But then, let me put it to you this way. When I was my first marriage, my father-in-law, his father was still alive. He was 96, I think it was. And he always, he told me, he said, because I asked him, I said, Pop, I said, what does it take to live a long life like you've lived? And he said, let me tell you what he told me now. He told me, he said, we work at daylight, and when we get hot, we stop. we come in, we take a nap in the middle of the day. Or when he said nap, he said we lay down on the porch and doze off. And then right before dark in the evening, we go back to work and we work way up into the night. He said in the summertime. He said, you don't wear your body out in the heat. And then I had a neighbor that lived down the road. We called him Uncle Ray because he was 98, I think. And he was just kin to everybody because he's so old, you know what I mean? Everybody called him Uncle. And I was at his house visiting. And one day his brother came up. I heard somebody drive up in the driveway, and I got up and went to the door. And I said, somebody drove up in, and I told him the kind of vehicle. He said, oh, that's my brother. He said, he'll be in here in a few minutes. So I sitting there talking to him, drinking some coffee. And like 20 minutes went by, seemed like, and I said, I thought your brother was out there. He said, oh, he is. He's coming. He's a little older than I am. He'll get here eventually. And I thought to myself, good Lord, have mercy. But I asked him, I said, Uncle Ray, I said, what do you attribute life and longevity to? And he said, first of all, you got to love the Lord, son. And secondly, he said, come here just a minute. He walked me to he lived in a little little cabin-like house, and walked me to his bedroom door. He opened the bedroom door. He had a little nightstand beside his table, and on that nightstand was a bottle of whiskey. He said every night before I go to bed, a little shot glass about 1.5 inches high sitting there. He said I pour that full and down it, and I go to sleep. He said, I've done that for the last 60 years of my life. He said, I don't drink. He said, I never touch it until I go to bed. He said, I don't drink at all. He said, and that helps me to rest. And when it gets hot, I don't go outside and I don't do anything in the heat. I don't wear my body out, because he said, if you ever have heat exhaustion, you're never really any good anymore. And see, I can attest to that because I've had heat exhaustion twice in my life. And it's like when I start getting hot now, I feel it coming on again, and it's a little panicky when it happens because you'll go out of consciousness and you won't even know it. So I try to watch that. And even the gentleman that I bought the previous owner of Pecan Grove, I was talking to him 30 years ago, and he was in his mid to late 80s at that time. And I asked him, I said, sir, I said, and he was as healthy as a horse. That man, I remember one day he had a tractor tire went flat off the back of his tractor, and he had it leaned up against the tailgate. And I told him, I said, hang on just a minute, let me get around there, and I'll help you put that up in the back of the truck to go have it fixed. Well, when I was walking around the truck, I just heard this. And when I walked around, he done throwed that big old tractor tire up in the back of that truck, a rear tractor tire off of a big tractor. And I said, sir, I said, you're going to hurt yourself doing that at your age. He said, what, now you're going to insult me? And I told him, I said, no. I said, it's just when people get older, their bodies, he said, there's nothing wrong with my body. I take care of my body. And he told me that he saw his daddy have a heat stroke and fall off of a roof. And when he did, he said his father told him, said, son, if you ever go to get hot, just stop. He said, even if they fire you, it ain't worth it. Your health, you're never any good once you've had this happen. And he said, and I've always kept that as long as I've lived. He says, and I tell you what, he said, it's never let my body still feels good. It doesn't let me down. And I'm in my 80s. And I can still do anything I want to do. And the man worked hard every day. I remember he's in the gardens out there with a tiller. You know, at his age, just running a tiller in the garden and everything. And I thought, well, you know, I mean, I can't argue with that. But, guys, there's the things that's going to be happening in the near future. They're not man-made, okay? We're going to be blamed through global warming that this is what we've done to the planet. Now, we are doing things to the planet. Don't get me wrong, there are things we're doing to the planet that is harmful. All these nuclear plants and emitting all these carbon mess into the air, these harmful chemicals and stuff like that from these big textile plants and stuff like that. It's not good. But one volcano can go off and literally put more trash in the air than all these together combined. So to say we're destroying the earth in that aspect really isn't honest. The things that's going to be happening is happening because the earth goes through cycles. And it just happens to be during our lifetime that this is happening. And we have greedy people in positions of authority that want to capitalize on this. Now, there is some things that's coming down the pipeline that I alluded to this on the live stream the other night. People like to, for me to give them a tip afterwards. And I alluded to it, me and Wanda did, that we're going to be going into some times that are, everything is, the word natural is going to go away. They don't want anything natural in the future. They want everything, the devil wants his fingers into it. Let's just put it that way. He wants to tamper with God's creation. You see, in the beginning, he tampered with God's creation through the food by making man fall from in the beginning with food. And in the end, he wants to destroy God's creation with food also. So he's going to be tampering with, there's things that's going to be put into all the food systems. The scripture says that in the latter days of this age that we live, you won't be able to buy, sell, or trade lest you have the mark. And people go, well, I'll sneak around, I can do this or I can do that. Well, no, that's just not going to be possible. Because, first of all, these people who wear these watches that, mine's just a plain old cheap Timex, but there are people who wear these watches that reads their blood pressure, their heart rate, it's their computer, it's all this kind of stuff. That thing also reads your DNA constantly, and it's transmitting your DNA back and forth with the main computer system. But the new food that people is eating today, a lot of your boxed foods, your cereals, lots of these types of foods, your ready-mix foods, all this kind of stuff, have nanoparticles in them that is in your bloodstream once you eat it. And this watch will be able to read that stuff. Or if you go to a doctor to have blood work done, and those nanoparticles will show up in that blood work. And if you're during this period of history where you can't buy, sell, or trade without the mark, and then you say, well, I'm sneaking around doing this, and then they take a blood sample from you, and there's nanoparticles in there, and those nanoparticles tell them exactly what product you ate, and then they'll come to you and say, well, we found this in your bloodstream, and we have no record of where you purchased it. How did you get this? Where did it come from? And you'll be punished. I mean, this is the new beast system that's coming. And that's why we're actively trying, Wanda and I, I don't know will it happen in my lifetime. There's a real good possibility that it's going to be really, really soon from now. We're trying to come up with a system where we don't have to go to town for anything. Because my understanding is, allegedly, that's going to be put in all food products. It's going to, even fresh vegetables in the store, it's going to be put into all meats that you buy. It's going to be, you're going to be tampered with and altered. And there's just things, guys, it's just not good. And that's why Wanda and I, for the last 5 to 6 years, have been trying to hide things in our videos, where little nuggets, where people would become more self-sufficient and not depend on the grocery stores, because that's how they're going to get you, is through the food system. And I want everybody to be a farmer. And I don't mean big farmer, I mean growing in containers, growing in raised beds, growing in little garden plots, growing as much of our own food as we can to get out of the system. The scripture tells us to come out of it, to be separate from it. Now, there's a lot of different meanings behind that, and there's as many different opinions about that as there is opinions to have. And I believe it can encompass the food system. I believe it's going to encompass the banking system, because the cash will be taken away at some point. There'll be no more writing checks. You'll only have a digital currency. You really won't ever see any kind of currency. And people goes, well, I'm buying gold and silver. Well, that's great. But all it takes from the White House is the stroke of a pen, and gold and silver can become illegal. And it's not like it had never happened before, because it used to be illegal to own gold in the United States because of the stroke of a pen from a president. So it's not like that's even a guarantee, because as a matter of fact, in Ezekiel, in the scriptures, it says that people in the latter days of this age that we're going into will cast their gold and their silver into the streets, and they will curse it because they can't eat it. And when I read that and I think about all the people that's investing in gold and silver, we still haven't come to the mentality yet that we're to come out of the system. And I don't know how else to say it. And I know we have to have a type of a currency to be able to survive. And currency doesn't necessarily have to be dollar bills. It doesn't necessarily have to be coins. At one point, in Rome, currency was salt. I mean, currency is just simply a medium of exchange. In other words, it's a good. When I do something for you, you give me something in return as a medium of exchange to reward me for what I did for you, and vice versa. So currency can be anything. It doesn't have to be gold and silver. As a matter of fact, gold belongs to God. He's the one who created the gold and the silver. It's all His. It's not ours. We never really own it. It's kind of like your cell phone. You never really own your cell phone. Now, you may own the device, but what you buy is not the phone. It costs, the latest I heard to make a little smartphone was $11.60-something to make that phone, because it's mostly sand. What you're buying and paying for is the right to use the internet, or the system that was created for that stuff to function. That's what you're paying for. You're not paying for the phone. You've been lied to if you believe if you're buying a phone. You're not buying a phone. The phone costs just a few pennies. You're paying for the right to use a system which you will never own. It's never yours. And that's how easily it is to trick someone into believing that they actually are paying for a service, and you're not. I don't own a phone. I don't want one. I have been told that there's going to come a period in history to where it will be mandatory for every individual to have a phone, or you will suffer penalties. You'll be put in jail or whatever. And I guess when that time comes, they'll just do to me whatever they're going to do to me. But they have to have it with everybody to have some device so that you can be monitored or controlled or whatever. And I'm just not going to do it. I lived up until I was in my, I want to say I was in my mid-40s before I bought my first cell phone, and it was a track phone at that time. And then when my businesses really busted and was booming and flourishing, I did have a cell phone for my business that I used. But up to that point in my life, I lived and traveled the United States. I traveled all over the country, everywhere, without a phone with me, and never thought twice about having a phone. We didn't think about having to stay connected with somebody every moment of our life. You know, now when a phone goes off, people's like rushing over there. Like, I gotta see. And I'm like, what? I mean, to me, that's the stupidest thing in the world. I fired men on my jobs because of phones. You know, I'd catch them texting, or I'd catch them looking at their phone or something. I'd fire them right there on the spot. I say, "You're working for me. You're not working for a phone company. You're not." And when one guy told me, he says, "Yeah, but that's my new girlfriend, or my new fiance. I'm sorry, that's my new fiance, and we're planning a marriage, a wedding." And I said, "Well, you can do that after work." I says, "You know what? Better yet, I'm going to give you all the free time you need to be able to plan it. You're fired. And I said, because I told you when I hired you that stayed in the truck. Now, at 9 o'clock for your break, if you want to look at it, that's fine. But when we go back at 9:30 to work, it stays in the truck, and you don't touch it again until dinner. And that's just my rules. And I had the right to make those rules because I owned the company. And some people just couldn't abide by it. They had to have that phone with them. They felt like that literally if they didn't, they were just going to die. And of course, I got rid of those kind of people. But it's because we're being controlled and we don't even realize we're being controlled, guys. And I guess for Porch Time today, I just want us to come down to the very brass tacks and realize that the system that's out there, or that's being created, it's already been created, it's just being implemented, is there to control every human being. And it's part of the beast system at the end time. And the only way we get beyond that is we quit putting our faith in a device, which you never really own, and put your faith in the Lord and in Christ. Put your faith in the one who has the answer for everything. Who is, he says he's a friend that sticks closer than a brother. He's the Alpha, the Omega, the beginning and the end. You know, without him was nothing. And nothing was made without him. I mean, put your trust and your faith in that rather than in a device. And please, don't look at me as a prophet. I am not a prophet. I will never be a prophet. I don't want to be a prophet. Now, how do I know what I know? I'm going to tell you how I know what I know. Because I'm a farmer. My life and everything about me depends upon the weather and what's going on. And a man who pays attention to those things soon learns how to read the patterns of life and the patterns of weather. You soon learn how to, all you've got to do is see something happening. And my mind, in a lot of ways, is like a computer. Whenever I see things happening, God has given me the ability to be able to see beyond that. Like when I used to build these big $1 million homes, when I would look at the blueprints, I could basically memorize them in just a matter of minutes. And I could walk my way through that whole build of that building, and I could see every pitfall in that build immediately. That's a God-given gift. That's not anything I work toward. That's just something God blessed me with. Now that I've gotten older, and I've been out of it now since 2010, I'm not as sharp on it as I used to be. Because I do little building projects around now, and I catch myself slipping because I'm not doing it on a daily basis anymore. Some things stick in my mind in framing. I mean, certain measurements are all just common measurements. You don't have to worry about it. You know, different pitches and angles and stuff like this. Those things don't change. They're constant. But we have to understand that there are things that do change in life. And we have to make sure that when these things change around us, that we make sure it lines up with what the Father wants it to line up with. Not all things, even though they look good, are good. Not all technology, even though it can be used for good, is good. Even the device that I'm using here right now to film this very video is a harmless piece of equipment, but it could be used for bad. And it's all about how and what we do with our lives, people. We've got to learn to put our trust in the Lord and not in man and his wicked devices. So for Porch Time today, that's, I guess, was what I want to try to get across more than anything else, is to put our belief and our trust in the Lord and not in man or his wicked devices that he uses. Because man and men who create these devices all have agendas behind it. They're not just thinking, oh, I've created this great new device and look what it's going to do for mankind. No, there are people out there that grab these things and pull them off the markets because if they go against their agendas, they don't want you to have anything that's beneficial for yourself. So keep that in mind as we move forward. And remember, 2023, the year for solutions. It's not a year of problems, even though we're going to have problems and we're going to have challenges this year. But we're going to turn those challenges into solutions. And these solutions are what that's how we're going to look at it. We're not going to look at it negatively. We're going to look at it positively. We're going to look for solutions to everything that's going on. Like the gamma rays that the earth is emitting like crazy right now. The radiation poisoning coming out of the earth like crazy right now that's destroying crops left and right. What is the solution for this? The solution is to grow in containers about 10 to 12 inches off the ground and get away from some of that. Now, it's not going to get rid of all of it, but it gets rid of a lot of it. And you're able to grow a plant in something that you can control the environment in that small area around. And you can fertilize it and control it in a lot better way than you can if it's stuck in the dirt in the ground. So guys, thank you once again. We love you and we appreciate you. And continue to watch and give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to us. Lots of people are telling me that they can't be able to find me and come to find out they were unsubscribed from us, which doesn't surprise me because YouTube, we look at our analytics about once every month or two. It's not a big deal to us, but occasionally we'll look at them. And it'll say, you gained this many subscribers and yet our total number never goes up. What that means is YouTube has took a lot of our subscribers away from us. So, and that's okay because we only want the ones that the Lord gives us anyway. So, but guys, if you give us that thumbs up, it does put us in a little bit better algorithm and we're able to reach more people for the cause of Christ. Thank you guys from Deep South Homestead.